Hey y'all, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis here on July 19th. It is in the afternoon, late afternoon, probably about 6 o'clock. Temperatures here are well over 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So today's video is going to be pretty quick. But what I want to do is show you Ansellia africana that is blooming right now. It's kind of a weird bloom time. It's usually, the blooms usually come earlier in the year, so when this put a spike up, I was pretty happy. But basically I want to show you a little bit about A, the flowers, and B, why Nina over at Ninja Orchid says that this particular species is pretty bulletproof, and I have to agree. This is one of those species that not only does well in this kind of a climate and this kind of temperatures, but just thrives. And let me show you some really fat bulbs on this one, and talk about how it went from literally a half of a single bulb into the plant that you see today. So, oh, and also show you its battle that it lost with a grasshopper, a very large grasshopper. Let's get this camera turned around. All right, so this is what's left of my Ansellia africana spike after a single large grasshopper had its way with this one. So you can see that this one is got great color, really vibrant. I love those spots, they're really well defined there. And then if you can see in the lip here, it's got those big keels. And those keels are those ridges there, and it's a pleasant fragrance. It's not an amazing one, it's not a great one, it's not a bad one. It just kind of exists. It's kind of a musky odor, sort of a musky odor mixed almost with laundry soap. So it's okay. But you know, I went over to see this one, and as you could imagine, I saw damage from some chomping insect, and I couldn't see it. I thought it was the cucumber beetles again, because they can do stuff like this, the little jerks, but they seem to be gone this time of year. And so I came back out to water the plants, and then just this, you know, monstrous grasshopper came flying out. So I grabbed him and I threw him as far as I could, and he flew away. So hopefully I will never see him again. But you can see the kind of damage that they do. They'll just come in and mow these flowers down, and there's really nothing you can do about it. If you're going outside, the only thing you can do is get a physical barrier. But it's a really rewarding species if you're in a hot climate. You know, you pour on the water during the summer. You give them a dry winter rest. If you don't give them a dry winter rest, they may or may not bloom. They might bloom poorly if you give them a bunch of water. They might not bloom at all. So I recommend giving them a pretty dry winter rest. But you can see, you know, this is a pretty robust plant. It's in a small pot. It was a 4-inch pot. So I got a single bulb, this one, from a friend who was like, "Hey, I have this Ansellia africana, do you want it?" I said, "Sure, that's great." So he sent it to me, and then he wrote back, and he's like, "Hey, I was only able to send a single bulb, and it didn't fit in the box, so I cut it in half." So I got this bulb, and back then it was quite a bit larger, and probably looked similar to this one, but only half of it. And you know, like Nina says over at Ninja Orchids, you know, these guys are bulletproof. This shipping a single half bulb over with a few roots is perfectly acceptable, and it came back and is doing really nicely. So, you know, that was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it's bloomed 1 or 2 times since then. In fact, this growth here, let me put this down in the pot to kind of hold it up. But this growth here started out as a flower spike, and then, well, it put out a normal growth, and then it started with a flower spike, and then that flower spike turned into another growth, which then eventually bloomed. So they're kind of weird. They're in that same Cymbidium family as, of course, Cymbidiums, Grammatophyllums, Certipodiums, Catasetums in that whole alliance. So they are tough plants for sure, and they grow in Africa and in actually some pretty warm parts, but in a really broad area of Africa. It's not just like one particular region. It's a huge region, and there are different local variants of the species, and you know, there has been some thought that there's a couple species and then they're all lumped into one, and then who knows what taxonomists will do. But this is one that will put out aerial roots, as you can see here. So, you know, I brought this one in for, I don't know, 3-4 days, maybe even longer. All of these root tips are green, and apparently the air conditioning of inside has kind of ruined some of the root tips, but you can still see there's plenty of green ones. And what they do is they grow up in sort of a basket, so that as debris falls, it gets caught in these roots, and then it just forms this fertilizer that slowly breaks down. And so they are pretty hungry plants. They do appreciate a lot of fertilizer, and during the growth phase, and then another dry winter rest, like I mentioned. So this is yet another species of mine that I seem to have acquired an affinity for, that wants to be dry pretty much all winter long. You can also see that the leaves they're somewhat flimsy, but they're more flimsy than a Cattleya, but not quite as flimsy as a Catasetum. So they're kind of in between. And they grow in these long canes, and they stay nice and compact. You can see that the bulbs here are not spreading out across the pot. This is a very happy mature plant that will probably stay in this pot for many years to come if it keeps growing in this direction towards the middle. You know, that's like 1, 2, 3 growths, assuming that we get 1 growth a year, which is not really accurate. We get more than that, but you know what I'm saying. It's got plenty of time to hang out in this pot, and a very robust root system, so it might actually end up cracking the pot before, in which case I would just throw it in a larger pot and then add media and be done with it. But anyway, it's a really rewarding species that takes up quite a bit of vertical space, but not so much horizontal space. Have a great weekend. Bye.